Today is Virginia Dare's birthday, August 18, 1587, which would make her 422. She was the granddaughter of John White, the founder of the second Roanoke County. The first, in 1785, was scuttled by hurricanes and battles with the Native Americans, and most of those colonists were rescued by Sir Francis Drake and sent back to England. But White made a second attempt in 1787, and his granddaughter was born here, just up the road a piece. But it was still a struggle. And he left for England to get more supplies, but the wars in Europe and the many other complications made it 3 years before he was able to get back. In 1790, when he returned, the colony was gone. And so was his granddaughter, Virginia Dare. There was no sign of warfare. In fact, the village looked like it had been dismantled. And he had told them if the Indians had attacked them that they should make a special Maltese cross carved into a tree. There was no such cross carved anywhere in the area. But on one tree were the three letters C-R-O, and on the palisade of the fort was Croatan. And Croatan was the name of what is now Hatteras Island, and the name of the people who lived there. Had they been captured? Had they gone willingly? Were they dead or alive? He wanted to explore and see where they might be, but weather prevented him from going there. And that just always seemed like the strangest part of the story. It's like you came all the way from England, and now you had to travel 5-10 miles to another island, and you didn't make it. And then I thought, I lived in North Carolina for 10 years, about 10 years ago, and I've been back for about a year, and I still haven't gotten to Hatteras. So maybe I shouldn't be so judgmental about this man. The lost colony is celebrated. The county in which it existed is called Dare County. And you can see an outdoor theater production in Manteo throughout the tourist season. Virginia Dare is celebrated as the first English baby born on American soil. She is celebrated, and because of the mystery, throughout the early history of America, there were many novels and plays and adventures and fanciful stories about what might have happened to her. But she was not the first non-native born in America, in North America. Snorri Thorfinnsson was born in Vinland sometime between 1005 and 1013. Now, Vinland was a Norwegian colony which was somewhere between Labrador and Massachusetts, depending on where you think So he might have been born in what is now America. But since Norway didn't go on to settle this continent, they were pretty much forgotten. The second European born in the USA was Martin Diaguilas. He was born in 1566 in St. Augustine, the oldest European founded city in America. down in Florida. But the U.S. history tends to overlook what the Spanish did. We are fairly Anglo-centric. Now, there were also African slaves in St. Augustine, and the first recorded slave baptism was in 1606. But I think it's pretty unlikely that no babies were born between 1566 and the 40 years following. So that the celebration of Virginia Dare is done by ignoring the birth and the not recognition that the Spanish and the Africans were here before the British. But the racist history of America, at least what I was taught, didn't teach me that. Virginia Dare is remembered because she is white. Because many white people have their doubts about whether the Spanish are indeed white. In 1924, the U.S. Immigration Act prevented non-Europeans from coming into this country. And of those people from Europe, 84% were to come from Northern Europe, the Anglo-Saxons, and only 16% were to come from Southern Europe, because the race science at the time begrudgingly said that the Spanish and the Greeks and the Italians were white, but they had their doubts. And they were Catholic besides, so they certainly didn't fit into the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And that's why that was such an important label of waspiness. And Virginia Dare means a lot to white supremacists. There is a site that Mike brought my attention to called VDare, and it's virulently anti-immigrant, and it's listed as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it seems odd to me that Virginia Dare would be a racist hero, or a hero of racists. She was an immigrant, an odd person for an anti-immigrant group to choose. And if the lost colony was wiped out, it would seem that that would be an argument against white supremacy. If she survived and the English commingled with the Croatan people, then they embraced multiculturalism. But racism often defies logic. It's a defense mechanism, what Anna Freud would call a reaction formation. Whites who invaded this country, committed genocide against the Native Americans, and enslaved the Africans. Some of them are afraid that immigrants of color will do the same to them as what their ancestors did to others. What does it mean to be American? What does it mean to belong? This country currently is at the crossroads of immigration. We need to destroy the myth that America is a white nation. We have to do revisionist history because the history we have been taught is a white lie. A Beacon Books as a UU publishing arm by Viva Chomsky. They take our jobs and 20 other myths about immigration. She writes, Sources from textbooks to popular culture promote the idea that the real essence of the country is white. The oft-repeated phrase, "This is a country of immigrants," reaffirms this notion. The immigrants it refers to are European immigrants, because only by a large stretch of the imagination could Native Americans or enslaved Africans be included in the category of immigrant. This notion, I've come across it a few times just in this past year, and it's kind of hard to get my head around it because in my knee-jerk liberalism, I was thinking we are a nation of immigrants is an inclusive phrase. But it was my own blindness to the lies, what I've been taught, that I didn't see who I wasn't including in that statement. Some people say, I'm not against immigration, I'm only against illegal immigration. My ancestors came here legally. They failed to realize that before 1882 there was no distinction between legal or illegal. If you could make it here, you were legal. In 1882, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese came to California in 1849 like everybody else in the world, looking for gold. And after the gold had panned out, they helped build the railroad. But they were never really welcomed. And so the West was preserved for white settlers. In 1892, Ellis Island was set up to process immigrants from Europe. And only 1% were turned away. Usually, if they had a disease that was a communicable disease, or they had evidence that they were an anarchist. Most Italians came because Italy was in such turmoil as Italy seems want to do. It might not even have been Italy at the time. There was no government to send them official documents. And so they were put in a special area that was called without papers. And over that was the initials, which became an ethnic slur, WOP. So the very evidence is here that they came here with no legal documents and they were allowed in anyway. Now, of course, all immigrant groups, when they come in, usually have to run the gauntlet, the hazing that I think America does to anybody that's different. In 1924, the U.S. government got serious about immigration. And they restricted immigration to mostly northern Europeans. So if your ancestors emigrated here legally before 1924, there's no distinction. They probably did exactly what Mexican and Central American people are doing today, leaving a bad situation, looking for a better one. In the Depression, there was fear that the Mexicans were contributing to the high unemployment rate. And so the great liberal president, Roosevelt, started a process of deportation. Over 400,000 people of Mexican descent were deported in the early 1930s. And some 60% of them were citizens. Citizens. Was your grandfather a citizen in 1930? Where would you live if he was sent back? I might be living in Ireland had they departed my dear great-grandma, Mama McCarthy. Santa Fe, New Mexico, was founded in 1610. It's not celebrated like Jamestown or Plymouth because they weren't the dominant culture on this continent. They were vanquished. Even Jersey City was founded 2 years before Plymouth, but because it was by the Dutch, it was forgotten. Green Bay, Wisconsin, was founded in 1634 by the French. And so you have this history of America that's so much more than the British story that we've been told. San Diego, Los Angeles, San Antonio, all founded by Mexicans. In fact, they were part of Mexico until the U.S. started a war in 1848. They just took the land and expelled the inhabitants, and those that remained were told that they were foreigners. What does it mean to belong somewhere? I was born in Michigan, and I became an economic refugee. When I graduated from college, unemployment in my hometown was 25%. Its population has decreased 32% since I left. I spent the next 14 years in the Chicago area where I met my wife, and that feels like a second home. Ministry has made me a migratory worker. 4 years in Maryland, 10 years in Winston-Salem, 8 years in Indiana, and then this past year back here in North Carolina. Where is home? Where do I belong? The answer for me and for everyone is I belong where I choose to be. In my birthplace, I'm an outsider because I went out and got a liberal education. In Chicago, I was the rural rube. In North Carolina, I'm a damn Yankee. In Indiana, I refuse to belong because of prejudice that I developed against Indiana by growing up in Michigan and living in Chicago. Everywhere I have been, someone could argue that I don't belong. Belonging means becoming connected. How are we connected to New Bern? I'm still learning to say it because I want to say New Bern. No, that's wrong. So in order to belong, I need to say New Bern. And in many ways, we are a church of immigrants, a church of damn Yankees. But we can also be a refuge for liberal Southerners who are told that they don't belong anymore. I hope in all these fantasies that were created about Virginia Dare, I entertain my own. That contrary to the rest of American history, that she immersed herself in Croatan culture, and that the Croatans were willing to be changed by integrating their British cousins. That somehow there was a happy ending for all those people. But whatever happened there, it's up to us to make our own happy ending. What do we do to belong in New Bern? How do we make the Burmese and Congolese immigrants feel like they belong? How do we respect the inherent worth and dignity of every person? How do we accept one another? We cannot tell others to go back to where they come from unless we are prepared to do the same. And with me, it's so many generations back, I'm not even sure where that would be. But ultimately, we are one race on one planet. Nationality and nations come and go. Some of you have immigrants who are Prussian. Prussia doesn't even exist anymore. So what is your ethnicity? Nations come and go. But love remains. And love must be our practice. We must dare to love.
Thank you, Charlie. You just knew he had to work.